My brother replaced our deceased father's ashes with cat litter as a joke. Now my mom is devastated, and I don't know how to help my broken family. My brother replaced my deceased father's ashes with cat litter as a joke, and I don't know how to react. My dad passed away unexpectedly last year. It was sudden and messy, and honestly, we're still all reeling from it. He was the anchor of our family, the one who kept everything together, and without him, well, it's been rough. My mom, Quinn, has been trying to hold it together, but I can see it's a struggle. My younger brother, Kyle, has been acting out in his own way, mostly by being completely detached and making inappropriate jokes at the worst possible times. I've tried to be patient, we all have, understanding that grief manifests differently, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. We had Dad cremated as per his wishes. Mom kept the urn on the mantelpiece in the living room, right next to his favorite photo, a goofy one of him wearing a ridiculous fishing hat. It was a small comfort, a focal point for our grief, a tangible reminder that he was still in a way with us. At least that's what we thought. Yesterday, Mom asked me to move the urn while she was dusting. It felt heavier than I remembered, strangely so. I didn't think much of it at the time, just shifted it to the side and went back to what I was doing. Later, I was looking at the photo of Dad, feeling particularly sad, and I glanced at the urn. Something felt off. It was the weight still bothering me, and something about the color of the urn itself seemed different, duller, less polished than I recalled. I know this sounds morbid, but I had this sudden, awful feeling, like a cold dread washing over me. I picked up the urn again, really paying attention to the weight. It rattled, not like ash, but like pebbles or grit. My heart started pounding. I carried the urn to the kitchen, found a clean bowl, and with shaking hands I opened it. What spilled out wasn't ash. It was cat litter, used cat litter, the clumping kind. I recognized the smell instantly, even though I don't own a cat. Our neighbor does, and the smell is unmistakable. I just stood there, staring at the bowl full of clumps and granules, the ornate urn now empty in my hands, and I felt like the world tilted on its axis. For a moment I thought I was hallucinating, that grief was finally breaking me. But no, it was real, cat litter, in Dad's urn. I felt sick to my stomach, a mix of disgust and disbelief and a rising tide of pure incandescent rage. There was only one person who could have done this. Kyle, he's the only one who would even consider something so, void of any human decency. He's the one who's been making these dark, twisted jokes ever since Dad died, pushing boundaries, testing our limits. But this isn't a joke, this is desecration, this is a violation, this is. I don't even have words for how deeply wrong this is. I found Kyle in his room, headphones on, oblivious as usual. I ripped them off his head. He looked up annoyed. "What?" he snapped. I held out the bowl, the cat litter stark against the white ceramic. "Explain this, Kyle." He looked at the bowl, then at me. A flicker of something was at amusement in his eyes. "What's to explain? It's litter. This was in Dad's urn, Kyle, our father's urn." My voice was shaking, trying to stay level, but the anger was bubbling up. He shrugged like it was the most casual thing in the world. "Yeah, so you replaced Dad's ashes with cat litter. Are you insane? What the hell is wrong with you?" I couldn't keep the anger down anymore. It exploded out of me. He leaned back in his chair, completely unfazed. "Relax, Anthony, it's just a joke." "A joke, Kyle, this is our father we're talking about. His remains. How can you even think of this as a joke?" My hands were clenched into fists. Wanted to shake him to make him understand the enormity of what he'd done. "It's dark humor, okay?" Dad would have laughed. That was it. That was the breaking point. Dad would have laughed. Dad, who cherished Mom, who respected everything, who taught us to be decent human beings. Dad would have been disgusted, Kyle, absolutely disgusted. He just scoffed. "You're being dramatic. It's not like Dad's actually in there anymore. He's gone. It's just dust." "It's not just dust, Kyle. It's a symbol. It's respect. It's everything we have left of him, physically. And you treated it like garbage, like some stupid prank." Tears were stinging my eyes now, tears of rage and grief and utter bewilderment. He just stared at me, that same blank, detached look on his face. "Get over it, Anthony. Seriously, you're making a big deal out of nothing." I walked out, leaving him in his room, headphones back on, probably already forgetting the whole thing. I went to find Mom. She was in the garden, tending to her roses, her usual sanctuary. I didn't know how to tell her. How do you even begin to explain something this monstrous? I sat down beside her on the bench, took a deep breath, and started to speak. "I just hope I can get through this without completely losing it in front of her. She's fragile enough as it is. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to react. I don't even know how to feel beyond this burning, sickening anger. Reddit, please tell me, am I overreacting? Is this just grief making me see things out of proportion? Or is my brother truly as callous and broken as he seems?" Update 1. Mom's reaction was, "Quiet, too quiet." I told her everything, showed her the cat litter, the empty urn, Kyle's complete lack of remorse. She listened, her face pale, her eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the roses. When I finished, she just nodded slowly. "I see," she said, her voice barely a whisper. And then she went back to pruning her roses, like I hadn't just dropped a bomb in her lap, like I hadn't just told her that her son had desecrated her husband's remains. I waited for her to say something, anything, but she just kept snipping at the rose bushes, the silent stretching becoming thick and suffocating. Mom, I finally said, my voice tentative. Aren't you angry, upset, anything? She sighed, a long, weary sound. Anthony, I'm tired, so tired of everything. But Mom, this is Kyle doing this to Dad, don't you care? I couldn't understand her lack of reaction. Was she in shock? Was she just completely numb at this point? She turned to me then, her eyes red-rimmed but strangely calm. Of course I care, Anthony, but what do you want me to do? Scream, yell, ground him? What good would it do? He needs to understand, Mom. He needs to understand that this is wrong, that it's hurtful, that it's sick. And do you think yelling at him will make him understand that? Do you think Kyle is operating on logic and reason right now? She gestured vaguely towards the house. Look at him, Anthony. He's lost. He's hurting in his own way, a way we don't understand. This awful thing he did, it's not about Dad, not really. It's about him. That doesn't excuse it, Mom. It doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't, but screaming at him won't fix it either. She went back to her roses, effectively ending the conversation. I was frustrated, beyond frustrated. Mom wasn't going to do anything. She was just going to accept it, accept this horrific act, this blatant disrespect, and just move on. I couldn't, I wouldn't. I went back inside, found Kyle still in his room, still with his headphones on. I yanked them off again, harder this time. He glared at me. What now? He spat. Mom knows, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I told her what you did. He just shrugged again, that infuriating, dismissive shrug. So, did she finally freak out? Did she have a meltdown? Was it entertaining? She's heartbroken, Kyle. She's devastated. And you know what? She's not even surprised. That's the worst part. She's not surprised that you could do something this cruel, this despicable. That seemed to get through to him a little. His eyes flickered, a hint of something guilt, maybe, just maybe, breaking through the wall of detachment. He didn't say anything, just looked away down at his hands. Why, Kyle? I asked, softer now, the anger still there, but laced with a desperate plea for understanding. Why would you do this to Dad, to Mom, to me? He mumbled something barely audible. I don't know. Yes, you do, Kyle. Tell me, please. He finally looked up at me, his eyes clouded, confused, lost. I wanted to see if anyone would notice, if anyone even cared. My breath caught in my throat. Notice, care. Kyle, we all care. We're all grieving. We're all hurting. Don't you see that? He shook his head slowly. No, I don't, not really. It feels like everyone's just going through the motions, saying the right things, doing the right things, but empty, like it doesn't mean anything. And replacing Dad's ashes with cat litter, that means something. I was trying to understand his twisted logic, but it was slipping through my fingers. It's real, he said, his voice still barely above a whisper. It's something. It's reaction. Everyone reacts to it. It's not empty. I stared at him, really looked at him for the first time in a long time, I think. And I saw it then, the raw, gaping wound beneath the detachment, the desperate, flailing need for attention, for connection, however twisted and destructive. He wasn't trying to be cruel. He wasn't trying to be funny. He was trying to be seen. He was trying to feel something, anything, other than this suffocating emptiness. It didn't excuse what he did. Not even close, but it explained it in a way. It didn't make me less angry, but it shifted the anger, softened it somehow, replaced it with a different kind of pain, a deeper, more complicated kind of hurt. He wasn't just callous, he was broken. And we, his family, we were all broken around him too, each in our own way, failing to see each other, failing to truly connect, lost in our own grief. I don't know what to do next. Mom is still in the garden, silent, lost in her own world. Kyle is back in his room, headphones on, probably drowning out the world again. And I'm standing here in the middle of this broken house, holding a bowl of cat litter that was supposed to be my father, and realizing that this isn't just about ashes and urns and jokes gone wrong. This is about a family falling apart piece by piece, and I don't know if we can ever put it back together again. Update 2, the aftermath of Kyle's joke has been messy to say the least. Mom, after her initial quiet reaction, did eventually talk to Kyle. I wasn't there for the conversation, but I heard raised voices, then silence, then Kyle slamming his door. Mom came out of his room looking even more drained than before. Did you get through to him? I asked hesitantly. She just shook her head. He doesn't understand, Anthony, or maybe he does and he just doesn't care. I don't know anymore. What did he say? He said he'll put them back, she sighed, rubbing her temples. He said he'll put Dad's ashes back in the urn, like that fixes everything. And are they Dad's ashes? I had to ask the question, the awful, lingering doubt in my mind. She looked away, her eyes filling with tears. I don't know, Anthony, I honestly don't know. I don't even know where he got the cat litter. That was it. The final blow. We didn't even know if what we had left of Dad was actually him. Kyle's joke had robbed us of even that small comfort, that fragile symbol of connection. The urn on the mantelpiece now felt like a cruel mockery, a constant reminder of Kyle's betrayal and our family's fractured state. I decided I couldn't stay in the house anymore, not like this. Not with the urn, possibly filled with cat litter, sitting on the mantelpiece. Not with Kyle, detached and unrepentant, living under the same roof. Not with Mom, lost in her grief, unable to confront the reality of what was happening to our family. I packed a bag, told Mom I was going to stay at a friend's for a while. She didn't argue, didn't even look up from her roses. Just nodded again, that same weary, defeated nod. I found Kyle in his room, told him I was leaving. He didn't even take his headphones off this time, just grunted in acknowledgement. I spent the next few days at my friend Rebecca's apartment, trying to process everything, trying to make sense of the senseless. Rebecca was amazing, just listened, let me vent, didn't try to offer easy answers or platitudes. She just sat with me in the mess, in the confusion, in the pain. After a few days, I knew I had to go back home at least to try to fix things, to try to salvage something from the wreckage. I called Mom, asked if I could come over. She sounded surprised, but said yes. When I got back, the urn was gone from the mantelpiece. The living room felt strangely empty without it. Mom was in the kitchen, actually cooking dinner for the first time in months. Kyle was nowhere to be seen. "Where's the urn?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. Mom turned from the stove, a faint, sad smile on her face. "I took it to the funeral home," she said. "I asked them to verify, to see if they can tell if it's really Dad's ashes." And my heart was pounding, waiting for her answer. She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "It's not cat litter, Anthony, it's ash, human ash," they confirmed it. Relief washed over me, a wave so strong it almost buckled my knees. "Thank God," I breathed out. "Thank God it's really him." "Yes," she said softly, "it's him." But then the relief faded, replaced by a different kind of ache, a deeper understanding of Kyle's twisted joke. He hadn't replaced Dad's ashes to be cruel, not exactly. He had replaced them to test us, to see if we would notice, to see if we would care, to see if we were paying attention to anything beyond our own grief. And Mom had, in our own broken ways we had noticed, we had cared. Mom told me that Kyle had actually gone to the funeral home himself after their argument and asked them to recremate Dad. It was a strange, desperate, misguided attempt to undo his joke, to make things right in his own twisted way. Of course, they couldn't recremate someone who was already cremated, but they did offer to reprocess the ashes to ensure their authenticity, to put them in a new, simpler urn. That was the urn Mom had taken to the funeral home, the one that was now gone from the mantelpiece. She had asked them to keep it there for now until we figured out what to do next. Kyle was still in his room, hadn't come out for dinner. Mom said she had told him that the ashes were Dad's, that his joke had been pointless, hurtful, and ultimately meaningless. She said he hadn't reacted, just stared blankly at the wall. I went to his room, knocked softly on the door. "Kyle," silence. I opened the door slowly. He was sitting on his bed, staring at the floor, headphones off this time. He looked up when I came in, his eyes red and swollen. He had been crying. "It's really him, Kyle," I said, my voice gentle. "Dad's ashes, they're really him." He nodded slowly, tears welling up again. "I know," he whispered. "Mom told me." "Why, Kyle?" I asked again, the question still burning in my heart. "Why did you do it?" He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored my own, a pain that we had both been carrying alone for too long. "Because I miss him, Anthony," he choked out, the words raw and broken. "I miss him so much, and I don't know how to make it stop hurting." And in that moment I finally understood. It wasn't a joke, it wasn't callousness, it was pain. Raw, unbearable pain, twisted and contorted into something ugly and destructive, but pain nonetheless. And in that pain I saw a reflection of my own, of Mom's, of our entire family, lost and adrift in the vast, empty ocean of grief. I sat down beside him on the bed, put my arm around his shoulders. He leaned into me finally, for the first time since Dad died, letting himself be held, letting himself be comforted. We sat there in silence for a long time, brothers again, broken but together in the wreckage of our grief, finally starting to understand that maybe, just maybe, we could start to heal, not by forgetting, not by pretending, but by facing the pain together as a family, however fractured and imperfect we might be. We still have a long way to go, but maybe, just maybe, this awful, twisted joke, this desecration, this act of utter despair, was the catalyst we needed to finally start to find our way back to each other, back to ourselves, back to some semblance of healing. It's not a neat resolution, not by a long shot, but it's a start. And maybe in the face of such profound loss, a start is all we can ask for.
My mother-in-law wants to move into the nursery after the baby is born and redecorate it without my consent. Should I risk destroying our relationship to protect my boundaries? It started subtly, as most things with my mother-in-law, Genesis, tend to. We were giving her a tour of the nursery, a room painted a soft, calming gray, filled with the gentle promise of new life. My husband, Connor, and I had spent weeks meticulously curating it, from the cloud mobile hanging above the crib to the plush, forest-themed rug. I was about 7 months pregnant at the time, and nesting instincts were in full swing. "Oh, it's lovely, Maria, truly," Genesis said, her voice a touch too loud in the quiet room. She ran a hand over the crib's railing, her gaze lingering a little too long. "So peaceful. You know, it's just occurred to me I should probably move in here after the baby comes." I blinked, momentarily stunned. "Move in here?" I echoed, trying to keep my tone light, assuming I'd misheard. She nodded, a decisive set to her jaw. "Yes, into the nursery. It makes perfect sense, really. I can be here right next to the baby, help you with everything. It's the best way for us to bond, don't you think?" My smile faltered, replaced by a growing unease. "Genesis, with all due respect, that's not really necessary. Connor and I have been planning this for months. We're ready." Ready is a relative term, dear, she chuckled, a sound that grated on my nerves even on a good day. You're a first-time mother. You'll be exhausted, overwhelmed. You'll need help. And who better to help than Grandma? We appreciate the offer, truly, Connor interjected smoothly, sensing my rising discomfort. He was always better at navigating these delicate conversations with his mother. But we've got a plan, we'll be fine. A plan is one thing, reality is another. Genesis waved a dismissive hand. Bobbies are unpredictable. You'll be sleep-deprived, hormonal. You'll barely know your own name. I'll be here to take over to make sure everything runs smoothly. Take over. That phrase hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. It wasn't about helping, not really. It was about control. My control specifically over my own child, my own home, my own life. Mom, we really appreciate it, Connor repeated, his voice a little firmer this time. But we're going to handle it ourselves. We want to experience this as a family, just the three of us at least initially. Genesis's smile tightened, the warmth fading from her eyes. Initially? Oh, Connor, you're so naive. You think you can do this alone? Maria, be honest, wouldn't you feel more secure knowing I was right here in the nursery to guide you? I hesitated, caught between politeness and a growing sense of violation. Genesis, we're not doing this alone. We have each other, and we have friends, family, if we need extra support. But we want to figure this out ourselves as a couple, as parents. Figure it out? She scoffed. Maria, motherhood isn't something you figure out on the fly. It's instinct, experience, and I have plenty of experience. I raised Connor, after all. And you did a wonderful job, Connor said quickly, trying to placate her. But times have changed. We have different ideas about parenting. We want to do things our way. Your way? Genesis's voice rose slightly, a hint of steel entering her tone. And what if your way isn't the best way? What if you make mistakes? What if the baby needs something and you don't know what to do? Are you willing to risk your child's well-being just for the sake of doing things your way? The emotional manipulation was becoming blatant. She was playing on my anxieties, my insecurities as a soon-to-be mother, weaponizing my love for my unborn child against me. Genesis, we're not risking anything, I said, my voice finally gaining a sharper edge. We're capable adults. We're going to learn, we're going to adapt, and we're going to be good parents. And we're going to do it in our own nursery, in our own home, without you moving in. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Genesis's face was flushed, her eyes narrowed. She opened her mouth to speak, but Connor cut her off. Mom, that's the end of the discussion. We appreciate your concern, but our decision is final. She stared at us for a long moment, her silence heavy with disapproval. Then, with a tight, forced smile, she said, Fine, if that's what you want. But don't come crying to me when you realize you've made a mistake. She turned and swept out of the nursery, leaving Connor and me standing in the quiet room, the peaceful gray walls suddenly feeling less calming, more like a battleground. I knew this wasn't over. Genesis wasn't one to back down easily, especially when she felt she knew best. And in her mind, she undoubtedly knew best when it came to Bobby's, motherhood, and everything in between. I just hoped Connor and I could stand our ground and protect the fragile peace we'd created in our home, and in our nursery, before our baby arrived and the real battles began. I posted about it on Reddit, needing to vent and maybe, just maybe, get some advice on how to navigate this escalating situation before it truly spiraled out of control. Update 1 Reddit's response was a mix of validation and concern, a chorus of voices echoing my own unease. Many commenters pointed out the obvious red flags: Genesis's desire for control, her dismissal of our wishes, her emotional manipulation. Boundary stomping, one user called it, a phrase that resonated deeply. Others shared similar experiences with overbearing mothers-in-law, offering advice ranging from gentle redirection to outright confrontation. Armed with this newfound validation, I tried to talk to Genesis again, this time without Connor present, hoping a one-on-one conversation might be less confrontational. I met her for coffee, choosing a neutral public space, bracing myself for the inevitable. Genesis, I began, carefully choosing my words, I wanted to talk more about the nursery situation. I think there might have been a misunderstanding. She raised an eyebrow, a patronizing smile playing on her lips. Misunderstanding. I thought I was being perfectly clear. I'm offering to help. What's the misunderstanding? It's not about help, Genesis, I said, trying to keep my voice even. It's about boundaries. Connor and I need to establish our own space, our own routines as new parents. Having you move into the nursery, it just doesn't feel right for us. Boundaries? She scoffed, stirring her coffee with unnecessary force. Maria, we're family. Family doesn't have boundaries, especially when it comes to helping each other. Respectful families do, I countered, feeling my patience wearing thin. And respecting our boundaries is helping us. We need this time, just the three of us, to bond as a new family unit. Bonding? She repeated, her tone dripping with sarcasm. You think you can bond with a newborn while you're sleep-deprived and clueless? You'll be lucky if you can remember to feed it, let alone bond with it. Her words stung, hitting that raw nerve of maternal insecurity. I resent that, Genesis, I said, my voice hardening. I'm perfectly capable of caring for my child, and so is Connor. We don't need you to take over. Oh, but you will need help, Maria, you will, she insisted, her voice taking on a saccharine sweetness that was even more unsettling than her sarcasm. And I'm going to be here to give it, whether you like it or not. It's what grandmothers do. Not when it's unwanted and intrusive, I retorted, finally losing my composure. Genesis, you're not helping, you're stressing me out. You're making this pregnancy, which should be a joyful time, incredibly anxious and difficult. Her eyes narrowed, her smile vanishing completely. Difficult? I'm being difficult. Maria, I'm offering you a lifeline and you're throwing it back in my face. You're being ungrateful, selfish. Don't you want what's best for your baby? Yes, I do, I said, my voice trembling slightly. And what's best for my baby is to have parents who are confident and in control, not constantly undermined and overruled by their grandmother. Overruled? She sputtered, her face flushing crimson. I'm not trying to overrule you, I'm trying to guide you. You're so young, so inexperienced, you don't know what you're doing. And we'll learn, I said, standing up, signaling the end of the conversation. We'll learn, we'll make mistakes, and we'll grow, but we'll do it our way, Genesis. And that's not up for discussion. I left her sitting there, fuming, the coffee untouched. I knew I hadn't changed her mind, but I'd drawn a line in the sand, however shaky it might be. Later that week, Genesis started sending baby gifts, a barrage of items arriving daily. A musical mobile, different from the one we'd chosen, a baby monitor, a model we hadn't researched, a mountain of pastel-colored onesies in sizes too small for a newborn. Each gift came with a pointed comment, "This will be so much more practical than what you have," or "Trust me, you'll need this even if you don't think so now." Then came the bombshell. Connor and I were at home one evening, finally relaxing after a long day when Genesis called. "I've been thinking," she announced, her voice deceptively cheerful, "about the nursery. It's lovely, dear, but a little bland, don't you think? And those forest animals, are they really stimulating enough for a newborn? I was thinking maybe we should redecorate, something brighter, more cheerful. Perhaps a nice sunny yellow, and we could replace that rug with something more hygienic, hardwood maybe, easier to clean." I stared at Connor, my mouth agape. Redecorate? She wanted to redecorate our nursery. After we'd just finished setting it up, after we'd poured our hearts and souls into creating a space we loved, she wanted to tear it all down and remake it in her own image. "Mom, no," Connor said, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "Absolutely not. We like the nursery the way it is. We don't want it redecorated." "But Connor, darling, it's for the baby," Genesis protested, her voice laced with wounded innocence. "Don't you want what's best for your grandchild?" "What's best for our child," Connor corrected, his voice firm, "is to have parents who are respected and supported, not undermined and controlled. And that's what you're doing, Mom. You're not helping, you're making things worse." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then Genesis said, her voice cold and sharp, "Fine, do it your way, but don't say I didn't warn you." She hung up, leaving Connor and me staring at each other, the weight of her disapproval hanging heavy in the air. It was clear now. This wasn't about helping. It wasn't about bonding. It was about power. And Genesis wasn't going to give it up without a fight. Connor, seeing the strain on me, finally seemed to truly understand the gravity of the situation. He was no longer trying to smooth things over to appease his mother. He was starting to see her actions for what they were, a direct threat to our family, to our peace, to my sanity. He was finally ready to stand with me, to fight for our boundaries, for our nursery, for our future as a family of 3, not 4. And that in itself was a small victory, a glimmer of hope in the escalating storm. Update 2: Connor's shift in perspective was a turning point. He went from being a passive mediator to an active ally, a partner in setting and enforcing boundaries with his mother. We talked late into the night, strategizing, solidifying our united front. We agreed that direct, firm communication was the only way forward. No more polite deflections, no more attempts to appease. It was time for a clear, unambiguous conversation with Genesis. We invited her over for dinner, a carefully orchestrated setting on our own turf. We cooked her favorite meal, set the table with our best china, creating an atmosphere of normalcy, masking the serious conversation that was about to unfold. Genesis arrived, radiating a forced cheerfulness, laden with another bag of baby gifts. A set of educational toys that looked more like torture devices. We exchanged strained pleasantries, the tension palpable beneath the surface. Finally, after dinner, when the kids were tucked in bed, we sat down in the living room, the 3 of us, the air thick with unspoken words. "Mom," Connor began, his voice calm but resolute, "we need to talk about the nursery and about your plans for after the baby is born." Genesis's forced smile faltered, replaced by a wary defensiveness. "What about it? I thought we'd settled this. You want to do it your way, fine. I'm just trying to be helpful." "We know you are, Mom," I interjected, trying to maintain a calm tone, "but your idea of help is actually causing us a lot of stress. We appreciate your offers, but we need you to understand that we are not going to have you move into the nursery after the baby is born. That's not going to happen. Genesis's eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face. But I thought you'd see reason. I thought you'd realize how much you'll need me. We will need support, yes, Connor said, and we'll ask for it when we need it. But we need to establish our own space, our own family dynamic first. Having you move in, it's just not conducive to that. Not conducive? She scoffed. Connor, this is your mother we're talking about. I'm not some stranger, I'm family. I have a right to be involved. Being involved is one thing, Mom, Connor said, his voice growing firmer. Taking over is another, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to control everything, from the nursery decor to our parenting decisions, and we're not going to let you. Control? Genesis's voice rose, tinged with indignation. I'm not trying to control you, I'm just trying to help. You're being so ungrateful, so unappreciative of everything I'm offering. We are grateful, Mom, for your intentions, I said, trying to soften the blow. But your methods are overwhelming. They're making us feel suffocated, not supported. Suffocated, she repeated, her voice laced with hurt. Is that how you really see me? As suffocating? Mom, please try to understand, Connor pleaded, his voice softening slightly. We love you, we want you to be a part of our lives and our baby's life, but we need to do this on our own terms. We need to set our own boundaries. Boundaries, that's all I hear from you too, Genesis said, her voice trembling with emotion. You're pushing me away. You're making me feel like I'm not wanted, like I'm not important. Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a moment I felt a pang of guilt. Was I being too harsh? Was I being unfair to her? But then I remembered her manipulative tactics, her constant undermining of our choices, her blatant disregard for our wishes. And the guilt faded, replaced by a renewed sense of resolve. Mom, that's not what we're saying, Connor said, his voice gentle but firm. We want you in our lives, but in a healthy way, a respectful way. And that means respecting our boundaries, respecting our decisions, and respecting our need for space. Genesis was silent for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, So you don't want me to move into the nursery? No, Mom, Connor said softly. We don't. She nodded slowly, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine, she whispered again, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Fine, I understand. Whether she truly understood or was simply resigned to our decision, I couldn't tell. But for now, it was enough. The storm seemed to have passed, leaving behind a fragile, uneasy peace. We'd drawn our line, we'd stood our ground, and Genesis, for the moment, had retreated. The nursery, our peaceful gray haven, felt a little safer, a little more secure. But I knew, deep down, that this was likely not the end, but merely a lull in the battle. Managing the relationship with Genesis, maintaining our boundaries, was going to be an ongoing process, a constant negotiation. But for now, we had won this round, and that was enough to give us a moment of respite, a moment of hope, before the real adventure of parenthood began.